Welcome to the podcast, folks. Today we're diving deep into a narrative that spans centuries. How the U.S. took over land, hired the labor, and then, well, later labeled those workers as criminals.
Wow, that's heavy. So we're talking about history that involves territorial conquest, and later, policies that really twist the narrative, right?
Exactly. It all starts back in the 1840s when manifest destiny was in full swing. Like this idea that God or fate told Americans they deserved more land.
Right.
It's essentially divine permission for expansion, no matter whose land it originally was.
Kind of like, hey, we're here and we're taking what we want.
Yeah, pretty much. And before that, the American Southwest belonged to Mexico, which had just shaken off Spanish rule. Then, things went sideways. Texas, with its Anglo settlers, declared independence from Mexico. It was, the spark that eventually led to the U.S. stepping in.
So by the mid-1800s, the U.S. decided they wanted that territory for themselves, right?
Absolutely. Under President James K. Polk, the U.S. invaded Mexico in 1846, and after 2 years of war, spoiler alert, Mexico lost. The Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo in 1848 forced Mexico to sell nearly half its land, including California, Nevada, and other parts of today's Southwest, for a measly $15 million.
Yeah, that's insane. $15 million? That's almost laughable compared to the value of that land now.
Exactly. And here's a wild twist. Thousands of Mexicans suddenly found themselves American citizens, not because they moved, but because the border did. Imagine waking up one day and finding your whole identity shifted because the line on a map moved.
It's like one day you're Mexican and the next you're, suddenly supposed to speak English and follow entirely new laws.
Yes, it's, like waking up in a totally different country without packing a bag. And this open border situation lasted a long time. For almost a century, the U.S.-Mexico border was, well, shockingly chill. More of a loose guideline than a rigid wall.
That's hard for us to imagine today, with the wall talk and all the surveillance.
Exactly. Back then, the border was just a line that sometimes had nothing more than a barbed wire fence or a dusty sign. And guess what? American businesses were, all in on it because they needed Mexican labor.
Right, so the U.S. was benefiting from this free, cheap labor force working in agriculture, railroads, and more.
Correct. Fast forward a bit to the early 20th century, especially during the World Wars, and the U.S. started actively bringing Mexican workers in under the Bracero program. It was basically a contract labor system where millions of Mexican men came north.
Yep, but I assume that wasn't all sunshine and rainbows for those workers, was it?
No, not at all. They were often exploited, underpaid, overworked, and sometimes not paid properly at all. It was as if they were seen merely as replaceable parts in a massive industrial machine.
Right, and then things took a bleaker turn in the 1950s.
Exactly. Once the political winds shifted, language became loaded. Terms like illegal became common, and policies like Operation Wetback in 1954 were launched. Over 1 million people were rounded up and deported, sometimes even American citizens who had been living in the country for only a few years.
That really puts things in perspective. It's not just about managing borders. It's about actively punishing groups of people for their origins.
Exactly. And even later in the 1980s, when President Reagan signed the Immigration Reform and Control Act, it was a double-edged sword. Nearly 3 million undocumented immigrants got amnesty, but at the same time, the law criminalized employers who hired them.
Right. So it was like, hey, we're forgiving the workers, but not the companies. The ones who relied on them.
Exactly. And then, post 9/11, the whole approach shifted again. The creation of the Department of Homeland Security and ICE and the militarization of the border turned immigration issues into national security matters rather than purely economic or humanitarian ones.
So now it's less about labor and more about, security, with walls, drones, and armed patrols being the norm.
Right. And what's fascinating is that throughout all this change, open borders to militarization, the economic contribution of undocumented immigrants remains consistently positive. Studies indicate that they contribute billions in taxes annually, funds that could be used for public services.
Yeah. It's almost ironic, isn't it? The very people who help keep the economy running end up being labeled criminals for their presence.
Absolutely. And that's the crux of it. It's not really about protecting jobs or curbing crime. It's about fear, manufactured fear that gets exploited politically.
Right, fear is such a powerful motivator. Now, I get the point about fear, but don't you think there's a counterargument? I mean, some would say that controlling borders is crucial for national security.
That's a fair point. But studies like the ones from the Cato Institute show that undocumented immigrants are statistically less likely to commit crimes than native-born citizens.
Indeed.
And economically, they're contributing far more than they're taking out, which begs the question, if it's not about jobs or crime, is it purely about that manufactured fear?
Yes, precisely. It almost seems like a deliberate brainwashing tactic, doesn't it? That the narrative is so skewed that what started as a complex economic and cultural exchange becomes twisted into a simple good versus evil story.
Exactly. It's reminiscent of how the border was literally moved in the past to serve different economic and political interests. Think about it. At one point it was a formality, and then it was engineered to benefit the powerful.
Right, yeah.
And if you step back and look at the sequence, the U.S. took land by force, then exploited labor, inviting workers in, and later demonized those same people. It really exposes a cycle of historical amnesia.
I see that. It's like paying homage to a history that conveniently forgets its own misdeeds. We engineered the border crisis, and then we look back and say, well, it's just a matter of law and order.
Exactly. And the irony is stark. America built its economy on the labor of immigrants, yet the political narrative pivots so dramatically when it comes time to take responsibility.
Right. What really opened my eyes is the way policies shifted, from welcoming labor to later, under heavy security rhetoric, framing them as criminals. It's almost like a political sleight of hand.
Yeah, it's like first we expand, then we need the labor, and later we use that very labor as a scapegoat for our political gain. It's almost Shakespearean in its tragedy.
True story.
And let's not forget the economic data. Undocumented immigrants contribute roughly $11.7 billion annually in taxes. That's not just a number. It's real money that supports local economies and services.
Yep, exactly. So if the data supports their contributions, then why do the narratives keep shifting to criminality and threat?
It's all about manufactured fear and political narratives, my friend. Fear sells votes, fear sells walls, and fear, unfortunately, sells a lot of media attention.
Yeah. It's like we keep rewriting history to suit current agendas, without any regard for the legacy of labor and the human stories behind it.
Exactly. We took the land, we hired the labor, and then, through a series of political maneuvers, we ended up demonizing those very workers. It's historical amnesia mixed with political scapegoating.
Right, I totally get that. And it's chilling to think that initial acts of expansion and exploitation are still echoing in today's debates about borders and immigration.
Yeah. It's a clear reminder that history isn't just in the past. It shapes the present policies and the narratives we.
If nothing else, it's a call for us to re-examine the stories we tell about our nation. Stories that conveniently, erase who really built it.
Absolutely. There's a responsibility to remember the past honestly, to acknowledge that these workers built and sustained economies, no matter the shifting political winds.
Exactly. And maybe by doing that, we can finally move toward policies that are more just, more humane, and more truthful about our shared history.
Well said. It's not just about securing borders. It's about securing a future that recognizes and values the contributions of all those who come here.
Absolutely. This conversation really sheds light on the Layers and complexities behind what many take at face value.
For sure. And while some might challenge the idea by arguing security is paramount, we have to ask whether the measures we take are truly addressing the past and present or just adding more layers to a narrative based on
Right,
fear.
exactly. It's like we're being asked to solve a centuries-old puzzle with policies instead of understanding history.
Yep. And that's why conversations like this matter so much. They force us to re-examine where we came from and, perhaps make better choices going forward.
Yes, indeed. Thanks for this deep dive. It's been both enlightening and a bit unsettling.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining in, and let's keep questioning the narratives and ensuring our past informs a more just future.